Hi, my name is Kim Kingston, and this is in partial fulfillment of Edsp 281 for Rebecca Rabholt doing a mock IEP meeting with my parent, Mrs. Smith, and her son, Aiden. So, welcome today, Mrs. Smith and Aiden, Mrs. Coleman, Mr. Knighton, and Mrs. Music. Thank you for all being in attendance here. If everybody could please go around and introduce themselves and tell their relationship to the student, that would be greatly appreciated. Okay, now that we've got introductions out of the way, I would like to give everybody an agenda. We have 2 hours slated for this, since this is an IEP review along with a reevaluation triennial review. Mrs. Smith and I did meet a couple of days ago, and we went over all the assessment information. I just wanted to slate enough time to make sure that in case Mrs. Smith had any questions in regards to the assessments, that we could take the time to answer those for her. Okay, so are we ready to proceed? Okay, I'm going to give you a minute to look over the agenda. Mrs. Smith, the other day I had given you a copy of your parental rights and safeguards. I'm going to go ahead and give you another copy. Do you have any questions or concerns at this point in time? I just want you to remember that the parental procedure safeguards are here to protect you and Aiden. One of the biggest things coming from this policy manual is that we as a school district are making sure that we provide Aiden with a free and appropriate education in the least restrictive environment. So that means that we want Aiden to be educated amongst his peers, because it seems like greater learning takes place. We also want to make sure that our placement is best suited for Aiden's needs. So without any further ado, I will continue with the IEP meeting unless you have any questions, Mrs. Smith, on the procedural safeguards. Okay, great. Okay, so like I said, the purpose of today's meeting is to talk about Aiden's progress and do his annual IEP review. He was due for a triennial reevaluation, and like I said a little earlier, Mrs. Smith and I did go over those results. Mrs. Smith, did you have any questions regarding any of those results? Okay, great. Well, let's go ahead and get right into the IEP. So, we would like to start with Aiden's present levels of academic performance. And Aiden, would you please like to tell your mom a little bit about what your school, what you like most about school, and maybe something you don't like, and then maybe tell us a little bit too about what you like to do in your extra free time at home, and something that maybe you could improve on. Great, Aiden. Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate that. Mrs. Smith, could you please share with us what you believe to be Aiden's strengths in school? Great. Thank you for sharing that. Are there any concerns that you have in regards to Aiden's schooling? Okay, yes, thank you. I appreciate that. We're seeing the same thing with reading, writing, and math ourselves. And that's why we're here today. Would you like to share maybe some of your dreams and hopes for Aiden as he continues his educational journey? Thank you, Mrs. Smith, for sharing. I really appreciate that. So, currently, Mrs. Chen, Aiden's classroom teacher, she shared that he does pretty good in class. He is pretty quiet. When he does have something to say, he really usually contributes to the conversation. She knows that he loves to draw and anything that has to do with art. So she tries to present a lot of visuals with her lesson presentations, along with audio and kinesthetics. Aiden definitely benefits from using hands-on and visual. She says that he has a good foundation for his basic reading skills, so he knows his phonics, he has phonological awareness in place, and he also knows his high frequency words. Where he seems to struggle is his vocabulary and reading comprehension, both literature and nonfiction pieces. And in math, he does a good job of knowing his addition and subtraction facts, and then he does pretty well with single digits in multiplication and division, and then it becomes more difficult when they started getting into 2 and 3 digits. Writing, Mrs. Chen shared that he has very creative ideas. Aiden does a lot better, again, if he can start off writing by drawing a picture, and then he seems to get a flow going once he has drawn a picture. And then he needs to work on his conventions, basically, for writing. And Mrs. Kingston, myself, I shared that he is a very gentle and kind soul. He has a good heart. He's always willing to help others. He's definitely got a silly sense of humor, makes us all laugh in class. And again, I've also noticed, and he's also shared with me how much he loves to draw, and he especially loves to draw cartoon characters. Aiden is a 5th grader. He is reading and writing at a 1st grade level, and then his math skills are right at about a 2nd grade level. Aiden is ESL, meaning that English is his 2nd language. However, he had shared that he actually doesn't really know a lot of Spanish. He understands it, but he knows more English words than he does Spanish. And so sometimes there might be a breakdown in vocabulary just because of what's used at home and here at school. Aiden has also been receiving 120 minutes of speech language services per month, with the goal focusing on improving grammar skills when asking and answering questions. And Mrs. Coleman shared that he's making steady progress with this goal. As we had went over before, we had used 3 different assessments. We used the CMAS, which is the state-wide testing, where we used those scores from the spring, and they had actually shown quite a bit of growth with Aiden. Although he's not at grade level, he definitely had shown high growth in both English language arts and math. So that tells us that he's definitely growing his knowledge and his skills. And then we also used the iReady district assessment for both reading and math. And then the other 3rd piece we used was the KTEA. And all 3 tests, when we took that data, basically told us the same thing. Aiden has a pretty strong foundation in basic facts. He starts to struggle when we get into 2 and 3 digits. His reading, he has the basic foundational skills other than He starts to struggle when the vocabulary becomes a little more difficult. Thus, it affects his comprehension levels. Were there any questions so far, Mrs. Smith, in regards to any of those assessments, where Aiden stands right now according to what we've all seen in the classroom? Okay, great. Well, the next part is to determine student needs and his impact of disability. So due to Aiden's specific learning disability, he is behind in development as compared to same age peers academically. Since he has a specific learning disability, Aiden is served in the general education environment with support in reading, writing, math, and communication. And again, Mrs. Smith has told us that Aiden really enjoys reading and drawing. Lately, he's been really trying hard in math, which can get frustrating for him. He tries at home really hard, but doesn't want help from his mother, preferring to want to do his work himself. He regularly practices his math and reading on his iPad. He does enjoy using technology. So consideration of special factors is the next part of our IEP. As I mentioned earlier, this student has limited English proficiency. However, there's been a change in the way ELD is being addressed. Aiden is currently in all English general education classrooms. Instruction is delivered through a sheltered instructional model to help facilitate his access to the curriculum. His most current overall access placement score was 3.5, which indicates it is unlikely there is a language barrier. So he will basically be put on a pre-monitor status, and that means that Mrs. Marino and I will consult on a regular basis just to make sure that truly language is not a barrier. But again, like I said, Aiden has shared with me he doesn't know a lot of he understands Spanish, but he doesn't speak it as much. He actually considers himself English speaking. So let's dive right into the goals. So the first goal that we are proposing for Aiden is for his communication through speech and language therapy, Mrs. Coleman. And what she is saying, by September 2019, Aiden will use age-appropriate grammatical structures to ask and answer WH questions, who, what, when, where, why, after listening to a narrative or expository text, watching a video, or looking at pictures with 80% accuracy and minimal to no cues. And the second goal that we have for Aiden is in the area of reading. And when Aiden is given an instructional level text orally, he will accurately, appropriately, and use expression at 90 words per minute with 90% accuracy as measured by teacher records on 3 consecutive occasions by the end of September 2019. And we also have an objective for that reading goal. When given an independent grade level text, Aiden will use context clues to determine unknown words, reading with 90% accuracy in 4 out of 5 trials by January 2019. The third goal is another reading goal. And we're saying when given an instructional level text, literary or nonfiction, Aiden will identify the main idea and provide a minimum of 3 details related to the main idea with 90% accuracy in 3 out of 4 trials by the end of September 2019. And we also have an objective to go with this reading goal, and we've written, when given an independent reading level text, fiction or nonfiction, Aiden will identify the main idea with 2 supporting details related to the main idea with 90% accuracy in 3 out of 4 trials by January of 2019. And then the fourth goal that we have for Aiden is in the area of mathematics. And we wrote, when given 3 and 4 digit addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division problems, Aiden will accurately complete the problems 90% of the time in 4 out of 5 opportunities by September 2019. And then his final goal area we have is in the area of writing. And we wrote, when given a writing prompt, Aiden will get 1 minute to plan and 3 minutes to write a topic sentence with supporting details 80% of the time in 4 out of 5 opportunities by the end of the IEP in September 2019. Mrs. Smith, would you like to add anything to those goals or take anything out? Do you need us to explain anything further? Great. Okay, so this next part, we are going to go into the accommodations and modifications for Aiden. So some of the accommodations that we have listed, and this is not exhaustive by no means, so please, if anybody would like to add or take out, let's do so now. So we put text-to-speech for state testing, additional time for assignments, small group setting, directions read aloud, and math story problems, or directions read aloud, and directions read aloud for math story problems, the use of graphic organizers, and books on tape, along with pacing long-term assignments and chunking assignments, and just also asking whether Aiden understands the directions or not, and making sure that we give directions to Aiden one at a time instead of a series, or at least checking in with him periodically. So, if nobody needs to add anything or delete, let's go on to the extended school year. This student, Aiden, did not experience severe regression on his IEP goals and objectives. Aiden did not require an unreasonably long time to relearn previously learned skills. So predictive factors do not indicate that Aiden is a candidate for extended school year services. So with that being said, we are going to go down to state and district assessments. So for district assessments, the accommodations will be preferential seating, small group setting, extended time, and this is in reading. For writing, the same accommodations, preferential seating, small group setting, extended time, and the same goes for math, science, and social studies. So preferential seating, small group setting, extended time. And then for the state assessment, the CMAS, which is given in English language arts and math, again, we want the same accommodations. We want a small group setting along with extended time and text-to-speech options in math, science, and social studies. We have determined as an IEP team that Aiden does not qualify for an alternative state assessment. So the next part of Aiden's IEP includes the service delivery statement. And so Aiden will receive at least 90% of his education in the general ed classroom. And he will come to see me 240 minutes weekly for direct instruction outside the classroom. 120 minutes of that will be reading and writing instruction, and the other 120 minutes of that instruction will be in the area of mathematics. And then additionally, Aiden will continue to receive speech and language services, which is outside the general education classroom, and he will receive 90 minutes monthly. And then we are at the recommended placement in the least restrictive environment. So we have said that yes, Aiden is in the general education classroom at least 80% of the time. Aiden will receive services for academics outside of the general education classroom. This placement is best for Aiden as he does better in a small group setting versus a larger one. And so that's just saying that he's with me 240 minutes a week, and then approximately 20 minutes a week with Mrs. Coleman for speech and language. And so that leaves us with he meets the criteria for being in the general education classroom for 80% of the time. So the prior written notice within the IEP, the other options considered, and the reasons each option was rejected. The team considered having him in the general education 100% of the time, but it was rejected due to Aiden's needing a smaller group with fewer distractions in the areas of reading, writing, math, and speech and language communication. So that concludes our IEP. Does anyone have any questions, concerns? Well, I just would like to take this time to thank all of you, especially you, Mrs. Smith, for coming in, having been here recently to discuss Aiden's assessments. I appreciate everybody's time, and I know as a team we'll make sure that Aiden reaches his goals and objectives and hopefully even surpasses them. If you have any questions ever, Mrs. Smith, here is my card with all my information, so please take this. Please do not hesitate to call me, text me, email, come visit me. You're welcome in my classroom anytime. Thank you. Have a good day.